Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update, our program that helps you stay curious, connected, informed, all in real time. This conversation, like all of our Lunch Update programs, are made possible by our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie. And we'd also like to thank our Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly, and our small and emerging business sponsor, Easy Office Products. As always, we record these, even though they are live, and they will be posted to our website at madisonbiz.com. We generally have them up later in the afternoon, and I hope that as you think about things that you heard, things that you want to relive, things that you might want to hear again, things that you might want to share, that you access these at madisonbiz.com, both this and any of our previous lunch updates. Coming up, we will be joined by this year's pressure chamber winning company, as well as the head of the Wisconsin Technology Council, Tom Still. But first, here are a few chamber updates. As you can see behind me, the design on the wall of our boardroom is nearing completion. And we're excited to have been working with a local street artist and muralist, Mike Leroy, as he captures the essence of Greater Madison and our businesses. It's exciting to see how he sees Madison through his eyes. And we can't wait to show you the full totality of the wall next month. If you haven't already, as I've noted in previous episodes, you can go to MikeLeroy.com. Leroy is L-R-O-Y. So MikeLeroy.com, and you can see the genesis of the wall and where it's headed. Last week, we were excited to also announce the most exciting piece of the annual dinner sellout. So the annual dinner sold out in 3 days without announcing a speaker. Which is something that we are proud that you trust us as an organization. And we think we've rewarded that trust with bringing in one of the world's most renowned brand leaders, Greg Hoffman, to keynote the 69th annual dinner on October 18th at Monona Terrace, presented by American Family Insurance. From the time he became Nike's youngest design team member, to the moment that he left the company as the global brand, the chief of global brand innovation, over those 27 years, Greg Hoffman shaped the story of that iconic company, Nike. Think of all of the campaigns from Just Do It to the more recent campaigns like Breathless. All of those have had his input, his artistic design, his fingerprints on them. As the head of design and innovation and marketing, he has molded Nike into what we now know as one of the most dominant global brands. And we're thrilled to welcome Greg and hear the inside story of his own journey at Nike, but also how those lessons that he learned and how designing things and thinking about how you create emotional response can help you and your own organization, your teams, and even our collective work. So with that, I'm proud to introduce our guest today. I'll start with Dr. Sue Wallace. Dr. Sue Wallace. Sue is the CEO of Voximetry, an emerging health tech company here in Greater Madison. They happen to have won this year's pressure chamber contest. She has more than 30 years of experience managing medical device businesses in the fields of nuclear medicine, radiation oncology, including high-profile executive roles at GE, Cardinal Health, Philips, and Accuray. She holds a doctorate in radiopharmaceutical chemistry and is a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. So with that, welcome, Dr. Wallace. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Great. And also joining us today is Tom Still. Many of you know he's been on the show before, president of the Wisconsin Technology Council. I was just proud to have last week been at a celebration to honor his 20 years of leading the Technology Council. He's also a columnist. You can read his Inside Wisconsin column that started in 1991 and goes on today in dozens and scores of different newspapers and outlets across Wisconsin. He retired in 2021 as a senior lecturer at the Department of Life Sciences and Communication at UW-Madison. He was the associate editor of the Wisconsin State Journal from 1991 to 2002. And as I look at the list of councils and boards and blue ribbon committees that he's been on, I'm not going to repeat the dozens and dozens that are there, but we talk about fingerprints. His fingerprints are all over the state's economy and particularly the state's technology sector. He's also the author on Hands-on Environmentalism, which was a book he was proud to put out many years before environmentalism became chic. So with that, thanks for joining us, Tom. So I'm going to start, Sue, with you with a few questions. I do want to get to pressure chamber and your new company and But I do want to tell a story to the audience that maybe goes back a little while. And about 6-7 years ago, you sent me an email and you said, and I had known you from some of the previous executive roles that you had. You sent me an email and said you were in discussions with this company called Accuray, and you had met with their CEO about potentially coming on board in a leadership position, and that they had a location in Silicon Valley and a location here in Madison, and they were the acquiring company of TomoTherapy, and that I should get to know the CEO, and you made the introduction. Then you stepped back, you ended up taking the executive role at the company. And I got an email from the assistant to the CEO that said he has about 20 minutes to meet with you on his way to the airport. So he came to the office, we sat down, and an hour and a half later, he almost missed his airplane as we talked about the why Madison story. And from that introduction, you created the pathway to what became a great friendship and a great relationship. And every meeting we ever had, I constantly beat the drum of why they should consider Madison the place for HQ functionality, for training, for all their manufacturing. And then last week, I was at a groundbreaking with their new CEO and their board and their employees. And we broke ground on a new training facility, worldwide training facility. So everyone in the world that trains on Accuray devices will now come to Madison, Wisconsin to do that training. But maybe most importantly is their new CEO stood up in front of their board and all their employees and all the mayor and all the elected officials that were there and said that Madison, Wisconsin is their operational headquarters. And I want to say thank you publicly for, if it wasn't for that vision you had then and the introduction you made, we would not be in that position we are today with Accuray having far more jobs in Madison than they do in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Well, you're very welcome. But I mean, obviously, you've rewarded me with everything I hoped would come from it. I mean, as you know, I'm just a huge believer in, the ecosystem and the talent pool and everything that exists in the whole greater Milwaukee, Madison area. And yeah, people on the outside, like in that case, some of the senior leadership at Accuray who are new to this acquisition called Tomo still, I don't think we're really aware of everything that was to offer there. And I think they are now, thanks to you. So I'm really glad to see it and it will.
And then in the full circle of all that story, right, you leave Accuray, you head out to the West Coast, yet you win pressure chamber, right? And so I want to talk about that a little bit. So for those of you today who missed pressure chamber, I'm going to ask Sue to just tell us a little bit about your new company. Don't do the 5-minute pitch that you did to win. Maybe just an elevator pitch of what problem is your team trying to solve with this new company?
I think there's two problems. And the first one is a myth I want to bust, which is that for the men, I hope the men are listening now just for this part, if nothing else. You might have heard that prostate cancer is a disease you're going to get if you live long enough, but it's okay because once you get it, you can still live with it. You'll die of something else. I mean, I've heard that for decades. It's not true. And I'm sorry to tell you that. And there's about 200,000 men diagnosed with prostate cancer every year. 50,000 of those men fail to achieve cure through the early phase solutions like surgery or radiation therapy, and they move on to advanced metastatic disease, and that's not good. Okay, so that's the first problem. Is like people need to understand this is a problem. This does happen, and then the second problem is that cancer is personal, and the treatments are not, and that's what my company Voximetry. That's the problem we were formed to solve. So for these prostate cancer patients that are in late stage disease, there would be administered drugs to try to treat that disease. But each person's unique drug interaction is different. It varies by as much as tenfold. If I administer the same amount of drug to two people, some of them will get much higher tumor response than others. And there's no way to predict that right now. So the standard of care is one size fits all. The physicians feel like they're flying blind. And we've built a software product to help inform the physicians on how this drug is going to behave inside this individual patient based on pre-therapy images that we take. And so now they can tailor the treatments to really get the best outcomes for all those patients.
So what was the response like? Now you can see why you won, right? I mean, it's just a fantastic story of solving a problem that most people probably didn't realize was a problem, right? I mean, I don't think the average patient really thought about it, about how medicine isn't, particularly this type of treatment isn't personalized, right? And that it's been very much a one size fits all. So how's the response been since winning Pressure Chamber? And what was the experience like being on stage, going through the process, doing it, pitching in front of a live audience, not just to investors?
Yeah, well, it's fun. To me, it's much easier to, it was fun. That's the short answer. And when I think about how do you sum up the experience, it was very surprising. I don't think I had any idea what I was getting myself in for, from the whole journey from sort of kind of applying through all the way, presenting in the finals. I think it's most similar to an escape room experience. This is fun. It feels like there's like not a lot of time and a lot of pressure, and somehow, even though you're in it yourself, it was like a team building event. It was really fun to go through it with the other finalists, and you sort of all learn from each other. And when you're backstage, everybody's a little nervous, but you're supporting each other. And so it was I just think every one of those companies was so exceptional. Any one of them could have won. So we were really thrilled, to come out on top. But so it was not only a fun and worthwhile experience. It was, I hate to say it, but it was so good for me personally. Zach, as you know, you personally came through and gave us all individual coaching on how we could maybe improve how we tell our story. And, I went home and cried for a couple of hours and then threw everything in the shredder, and definitely made some adjustments. And of course, it may have helped me that night, but it's helped me in everything I'm doing now as I go out and try to tell our story and have a better even slide deck to do it. And so it's really a valuable experience. And I just couldn't encourage people to not only participate in it if they're entrepreneurs, but to attend it and support it. I think that's part of what makes it go.
So as we talk about Greater Madison, we have trying to position it as this idea of health tech capital, that this is the place if you want to do health innovation. You can leverage a density of talent, an outsized market share. If you take U.S. market share of total tech jobs, we outperform our size. We have good capital. We have great mentoring. We certainly have payers, providers, technologists, and we think this is the place where you can have affordable, safer, better outcomes when it comes to health. You have an impressive resume, and have had a good run in Wisconsin. So you've been, as I said earlier, you've been at GE Healthcare in Waukesha, you've been at Philips in Fitchburg, Accuray in Madison, and despite now living in the West Coast, you are choosing to build your new company, the startup, and with your team here in Greater Madison. Why was being in Greater Madison important to you when you're already on the West Coast?
Well, it's not just the talent pool in the sense that you think of. We've certainly got an exceptional level of expertise. I mean, I'm in these very high-tech medical fields. You need highly educated people. There's lots of those in general. But for me, it's also a lot about, so I should qualify because I'm on the West Coast, but I was born and raised in Wisconsin. So I, like it or not, it's in me. But I also think I probably understand and appreciate what that means more so than people who might have grown up on the West Coast. And there's a work ethic and sort of family values and commitment to getting it right, and sort of risk mitigation that's kind of built into the culture there, and teamwork. And, my big thing for success is like, I need big brains with small egos, right? And I think those are, there's a lot of those that can be found, and so in general that works. But specific for this company, Voximetry, what I needed was a lot of medical physics expertise. I mean, that's really, I guess, the critical skill set to what we do. And when I go out and I talk to investors right now, and I say, oh, well, the company's based in Madison, and they go, oh, are you there because of Epic? I hear that a lot. And I say, well, no, actually, Epic is great, and it's good for us because they're attracting talent, and it is a lot of software talent, of which we use as well. I said, but the truth is, I'm there because of medical physics, and people don't appreciate this is the mecca, the global mecca for all medical physics is here in Madison, Wisconsin. Historically, I don't know the current numbers. We train over 50% of the medical physicists that are out supporting, physics in every hospital across this country and across a lot of the world. And so there's just a limitless talent pool there for me of expertise and advisors and mentors and people to support us in what we're doing. And that spills over onto, as you know, another panel we're having coming up. But that's where Accuray comes from, is some of that same ecosystem. And it's for people that are doing high tech, this is a great place to be.
Yeah. One of the things that we position Greater Madison as is ground level for the next big thing, right? It's acknowledging that We aren't yet competing necessarily on scale, but we compete on density. We compete on deep technology opportunities, and that those next things can and will happen here. Certainly Epic's an example of that, and now has become a calling card. As you said, people know.
And exact sciences now too, I hear.
Mm-hmm. Exact sciences 100%. So when you are out, like you're at a major industry conference right now in Boston, when you're out talking about Madison, and people say things like, oh, is it because of Epic? Or, they ask you the why. Do you think we've crossed that point where it resonates and they understand, or is there still some of that skepticism about how Madison is perceived?
Well, I still think there's work to do. I don't know if they're skeptical so much as they're just not informed, if you know what I mean. Skeptical kind of almost sounds negative. There's not a negative impression. I think it's still a little bit more blank screen than I would like. I think that they think of Epic and Exact Science as two companies that are in Madison, as opposed to thinking of, Madison, where those kinds of companies are, right? So when I come to Boston for a conference now, I don't think of a single Boston company. I think of, there's that Boston ecosystem and there's a bunch of companies within it. And that's kind of the shift I don't feel like we've made 100%. I don't know if there's more we can do to promote, or if we just need to have more of those big wins to get there, but I do think that we're moving the right direction, and not to try to sweet talk you, Zach, but I think your efforts have been huge in driving the progress that we have made. I know you've worked really hard on this, and I do think it's working. But people are still figuring out that there's anything at all between, New York and LA, right? There never was anything, and we still have to get them to understand. But I do think relative to the rest of the Midwest, Madison is a big bright spot. I do think
this is a great opportunity for us to bring Tom in. You talk about telling the story and building the narrative. Tom's been building that narrative for 20 years at the Tech Council, and creating branding around the IQ corridor and telling the story. Tom, I'm curious, you just heard Sue's sort of live on the ground analysis of what she's hearing about the entrepreneurial ecosystem. How do you assess where we're at right now in Wisconsin when it comes to entrepreneurship? What's your take on it?
I think we're in a really good place, and increasingly not just Madison, where it first began to bubble up, but in Milwaukee, in places in the Fox Valley like Green Bay, Eau Claire, Chippewa. So it's become much more a statewide phenomenon, which was really one of the things we were created to do. And so I think it's been good. I totally agree with Sue about, it's not that people think of Madison or Wisconsin negatively. It's just sometimes a blank slate. And so that's where everybody continues to work. But, when you think about some of the areas of expertise that you see in Madison elsewhere, medical physics, that's exactly right. Increasingly engineering, computer science, all of anything kind of tied to food and ag is part of that. Various other pieces around energy. So there's a lot that happens at UW-Madison that's really good and is producing the kind of research and the kind of talent that we need here. So I feel pretty good about it. I was just up at a conference that was put on by WDC in Appleton, and there was the discussion there from chief economist for the State Department of Revenue was around Wisconsin leading the nation in terms of new business startups over the past 10 years, or not the nation, excuse me, the Midwest over the last 10 years ago. So that's good progress, I think.
When we think about I love the idea of it's a blank canvas and that we're able to paint whatever picture we want, an authentic picture, but we're not trying to change a negative perception as much as we are trying to paint a new representation. I'll ask both of you this question, but Tom, I'll start with you. What do you think's missing? What needs to change still? From the economic summits that you used to host and all of the big thinking and the white papers and all of the public policy work that you've done, we certainly have made great progress, right? Everything you guys say is true, and I feel it, particularly over the last 10 years or so. But what's still yet to be done, Tom?
Well, there's always more work around venture capital and angel capital, although there's been some really strong progress there. I think what may be missing is still the total workforce size and heft and everything else. we, demographically in Wisconsin, we're probably not in the best spot in terms of trying to find those kinds of workers. I think policymakers in particular need to bear in mind that we need to do some things to reach out and find talent elsewhere. We can't just do it all by folks who are right here in Wisconsin now. So I think that's one thing that I think is holding the state back overall. And it's not just tech, but other industries as well.
Yeah. So you're, you decide to launch this company. Your team's amazing. I mean, you guys have your combined years of experience in the space is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. So you sit back and you start to think about, where am I going to put this company? What were those reservations or the things you thought about when you thought about Wisconsin? You already stated you love it. You were born here. You lived here. You've had executive positions here. Yeah. Well, what are the things that are missing that you think if we could build those pieces would make Wisconsin, Madison a slam dunk single?
I think there's kind of two parts to that answer. The first part is I think the workforce question worries me the least, in that I think you can, if the talent isn't there, you can get people to move there, especially now, honestly, with global warming and the cost to live everywhere going up so high. I'm coming now from the West Coast perspective. People are leaving in droves because of the cost of living. I think there's lots of things attractive about moving your life to that part of the country. And so I think that's going to serve us well, but they have to know about it, and there has to be a job there that, obviously the quality of life, family life, all of that is great. As a software company, in my worst case, I could have a lot of remote employees, frankly, and make this go, but that's not the desired state. And I think we can bring them. One more comment I just want to bring up, Zach, because when I was at Philips down in Fitchburg, I recruited a really exceptionally talented leader she had been working at Microsoft in Seattle. She was also a member of the LGBTQ community. And she said, well, I don't know. She didn't know anything about Wisconsin, and she wasn't sure with her family that this was a place she could move to. But when she learned more about Madison and more about Wisconsin, she was like, wow, this is a great place for a family like ours, and they came, so I think we have those things going for us as well to drive and support diversity. But I think me bringing out those people for all those jobs doesn't happen unless this company succeeds, right? So the second half of my answer is I still need to be able to raise the funds to build this company. And I've been thinking about that a little in prep for this call. And I think maybe, and I don't know, I'm relatively new to this entrepreneurial system in Wisconsin, so I may be misjudging it, and I hope Tom will correct me. But it's felt to me a little bit jumping in, like we've got almost like a singular set of kind of investor community that's trying to support these businesses. And then a really wide array of business types. As you know, we had yogurt chips and financial products, and me all in the same pressure chamber. And we're going to those same investors, and we're trying to filter through and find the ones that are a good match, right? But maybe it's inefficient, or I can see having more pillars of, I want to call it segmentation, where it's more clear who are the investors for these kinds of areas, who are the investors for these others, and help those groups come together faster and maybe kind of invest more strategically within more narrow ecosystems so that we move faster together. I don't have that answer, but I have a sense that might be a way to fine tune better the system we have to maybe come out the other end faster.
Yeah, let me build on that if I may, Zach. That is true. In essence, a lot of the investors in Wisconsin currently came up on the life science side. And so that's where they're going to focus. They're not going to invest in some of the other areas where they maybe don't have the expertise they need. And so, things like we have a conference coming up called the Early Stage Symposium. There will be opportunities there for people to meet with investors who are more likely to be in their sector. And so, we need to do better there, especially with some of the things coming down the road around energy and resiliency. Do we have enough investors in Wisconsin who are already well vetted in that? Maybe not, but I think we can get there. And I do think we can attract them from elsewhere as well, which is part of what we do. We look around and make sure that we try to find people around the country doing it. One other thing I want to add on what is Wisconsin missing, and Zach, you've worked a lot on this, we still could do better on air connections. It's been a factor for us as well, but that can always improve, and I think it will help bring more people here.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Sue, I know you have a busy day at the conference. Yes. I'm going to see you next week in San Francisco as we take you on the road show and hopefully close out this funding round for you and set you up for future rounds. So I'll look forward to seeing you next week for that. And so thanks for being with us and enjoy the conference.
Thanks, Jack. Nice to see you, Tom.
So, good to see you. Tom, as I said at the top, you're celebrating your 20th anniversary. It was a great party. It was a surprise party, which I was surprised that you were surprised, but you swear you were surprised, so I'll take you.
I was. Well, it just goes to show how clueless I can be.
But I remembered as you were talking about the journey that you've been on, when we saw the pictures of the different iterations, and in my time too. I mean, I guess I didn't say that in your introduction, but you're a mentor of mine. You're my boss when I was at the Tech Council. I was thinking about when we first met, and it was probably sometime around now. In 2002, so right around that time when you had left the paper and were actually working in the building that housed the chamber. So they were incubating the Tech Council inside the building, and that's when we first met. So I thought about that conversation and just what your vision for where you were going to take the Tech Council and what you were going to build, and to where we are today. But I wonder if you think about what were those, going back to those 20 years ago, and when you left a great career in journalism in a high-ranking position, and at the time journalism wasn't under the assault that it is now. It was still sort of a peak place. What were those early thoughts that you had about where the Tech Council was going to go, and then how do you feel about where you are today, looking back on those 20 years?
Yes, well, thank you. Well, first of all, I think a lot of people in the journalism world thought I was crazy at the time, because it was to really go out and start a new entity. And that's where we were. When I look back on it, there was a great board already in place that was so helpful, because these were the folks who really understood some of the technology trends in Wisconsin and where we might be going. I thought I did too, but I think what I brought to the party was the notion of communication, knowledge about what was going on in the public policy world, and just otherwise connections, being able to try to put things together and manage it. Where I thought we needed to go, and this sprang from the Wisconsin Economic Summits, which I moderated in the early 2000s. We needed to be a player. We needed to go beyond the traditional sectors that had defined Wisconsin for a long time. 2000 was the peak year for manufacturing in Wisconsin. It's never been back. Agriculture already was showing some signs of strains as it was being produced being done at the time. Tourism is great, but it can only get you so far in some cases. We needed to be active, as I saw the other regions were in the emerging tech economy. So we thought it began with the notion of public policy, with bringing people together, with making some noise, frankly, and just getting out there and doing it. So it was a great start, and I'm forever grateful to one of your predecessors, Bob Brennan, at the chamber for taking in this little startup at the time.
Yeah. One of the things that made me want to work for you, but also something that I have marveled in at watching it from the inside and the outside, is the ability to maintain the bipartisan approach. Right, the Tech Council somehow never gets any kind of partisan stink on it. I don't know a better way to say it, right? No matter, even when you oppose things or support things that someone might consider, to be partisan because it has partisan backing, you find a way to really keep it about policy and keep it about the betterment of the technology infrastructure. When you think about that, what stands out in how that's done? And how do you do that through the Thompson administration to the Doyle administration, the McCallum administration, the Walker administration, the Evers administration? There's big swings in partisanship there and in politics, and yet you seem, and the Tech Council seems to be on this baseline from when it started to where it is now. How does that happen? I mean, for others that are thinking about how do you maintain, I wouldn't call it neutral, because your organization's opinionated, but somehow it's perceived as nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm. And we are. I mean, that was, from the beginning, that was the notion that it was going to be a bipartisan organization. That's where we knew we had to go down the middle on and not so much on individual policies, but being balanced in how we approached it, doing the research. Some of this came from years in journalism, right? I mean, I had covered politics prior to that. I had been on the editorial page. I knew that no one party was in charge of all the wisdom, and that different people were going to bring things to the game, different perspectives, different ideas. And so we've really tried to look around with that notion that it's all going to be about good ideas, and put them out there and be able to defend them, be able to talk about them in what can be, some fractious settings sometimes, especially, in whether it's the state capitol or beyond. So I think we have just stayed true to the notion that we can do good research, come up with great ideas. We have a very balanced, large board that's going to add to that. So that's the basic secret.
Yeah. I'm looking over your shoulders. I see political buttons, and right. Can't make out all of them, but by looking at it, it looks pretty bipartisan, and the type of buttons that you have there. I think we're in a moment of hyperpartisanship, and where it's hard to stay authentic. I'm curious as to what do you see as the way out of this moment of where it's really less about trying to find compromise and getting things done? It seems to me it's more about beating each other into the ground, and the win matters more than how you got there, or what comes from the win. Are you optimistic? Somebody who clearly has been a political observer for many years, wrote about politics, covered the state house. I feel like the grayer I get, the more I start to say, it used to be. When I was, in my 20s and 30s, I'd go, I'm so tired of people telling me how it used to be. But what's the future look like from your eyes, from your vantage point?
Part of me is optimistic because political pendulums swing back and forth. And so we might be on the verge of that right now. I think a lot of people are wary of what they've seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years or whatever it might be. That's part of it. I think they want to move on. A lot of people I see want to move on. Another reason I'm optimistic is that sometimes the most fractious partisan fights are the ones that get all the attention. If you go to look at the legislature over the past 10 years or so, probably 85 to 90% of all bills that passed were actually bipartisan. There were Republicans and Democrats on 85 to 90% of those bills. Some are not that way. So I think, on the downside of it, and I say this as somebody who came from the world of journalism, journalism has to get better. It has to go back in some ways to some roots of looking at stories and assigning stories in different ways. As a reporter, I wasn't always just out on my own covering whatever the heck I wanted. There were editors who would say, who took a longer view of things, and this is where we need to be covering the issues of the day. Right now, I mean, you can see there are certain national news organizations, print and broadcast, that tend to go a little more in the different partisan paths. I think that has to get better, and I think they will discover that the audiences that they feel perhaps they have lost may return.
So you talked about bipartisanship, and so a piece of public policy legislation at the federal level, both our organizations I know are excited about, was the passage of the CHIPS Act, bipartisan effort, recently signed by the president. Obviously, there's significant funding for research and for the development of the next generation of chips. but there was also these regional technology hubs. And our members and those that have been watching this show have heard me talk about it a lot. It's been a top priority. We lobbied on 4 different iterations of the bill, and we're in DC a handful of times with delegations, and have been building a relationship with Brookings in order to tell the story of why Wisconsin, why Madison, and why this would be good. What do you think this means for Wisconsin? That, now that it's passed and we start to think about what we might put forward, what do you think about what it could mean for all of us, not just Madison?
And here there's a bit of a package of things going on that I should mention. Chips and Science Act, that has about $54 billion, I think, for chips and trying to enhance research and development and manufacturing here in the United States. Now, one company has chosen to be in Ohio, but I think they're going to need a lot of suppliers, and I think there will be other companies. So I think, in part, what that could mean for Wisconsin is another opportunity to compete for either chip manufacturing or to be a part of that supply chain. So that's one thing specifically. The science side of the Chips and Science Act, it actually has more in terms of dollars. And I believe that, what we'll see are agencies such as the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, and others trying to focus on areas where they see the possibility of innovation and transferring that innovation into actual production jobs and what's going on in the ground in the United States. Because rebuilding the infrastructure around that in America is going to be so important. It started with, as you well know, Zach, the Endless Frontier Act, which had a Wisconsin sponsor, Mike Gallagher out of Green Bay, and it was very bipartisan. And it was named after the original Endless Frontier document, which was written after World War II. It was one of those kind of breakthrough moments in American science and technology. And so I think it was building on that tradition. And, other pieces that are part of that would be NSF has its Regional Engines Program. Maybe we can talk more about that. And there's also the Inflation Reduction Act, which has a lot of money on the energy side. So what I think it means for Wisconsin, and I've seen some of this so far, is an opportunity for people who perhaps don't normally talk a lot to get together and actually try to cooperate. I especially see that in the Regional Innovation Engines Program thus far. I think it is a chance for Wisconsin to put its best foot forward in some areas, whether it be medical sciences, whether it be energy, water, other resiliency kind of pieces in the economy, and of course manufacturing that we do well. So I think it's a chance to have some high octane added to those sectors.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about NSF Engines. You brought there's a Milwaukee-led but statewide benefit proposal that you sent to us, asked if we'd consider it. We signed on. We just sent a letter to the NSF on behalf of the Water Council. Can we talk a little bit about that proposal? Why you're excited about it?
Two reasons, main reasons really. One is that it's the Water Council, it's us, it's Milwaukee Tech Hub who are at the core of this. But then there are academic institutions. There are major companies such as Rockwell. There are folks on both sides, both ends of the Milwaukee-Madison spur of the IQ corridor, yourselves included, others. So I'm excited because it's going to focus on innovation in some of those areas that are really important to Wisconsin. But also it's a coming together of the tribes. It's, for different organizations, whether industry, academia, or other economic development groups, to get on the same page. And that's just one that's going to be coming in from Wisconsin. There will be another one, I know, because we're a part of that too. It will be around food and ag, and probably a third that will be more around energy. And there may be others. It's a highly competitive process. We'll see how we do.
Yep. So each year the Tech Council releases a portfolio that tracks the investment capital in the state. And, we talked a little bit earlier about, we're headed out to the West Coast with Sue and her team. I'm curious about the trends that you saw in this year's report. What is there anything new and interesting that developed coming out of the deep parts of the pandemic?
Yeah. 2021 was a record year for angel and venture capital investment in Wisconsin by far. It was about 869 million, which started to get us up there in Minnesota territory, where that's where, often a place where we look to and say, hey, can we better compete with that, that neighboring state? There were a lot more out-of-state investors who were a part of deals, sometimes leading deals, often other times following. Those are the two biggest things out of it. I think that it really spoke to the fact that Wisconsin continues its growth. And in some cases, it was because of COVID rather than despite of it. So I'm looking forward to more progress. I don't know if we'll match 2021 in this year because there's so many other things on the sideline. But I think it showed that we're there to stay for a little bit.
Yep. So in order to help drive that, and one of the engines I think has been part of your toolkit to drive early stage investment has been the early stage symposium. It's coming up. It's one of your marquee annual events. It showcases emerging companies, technologies. It showcases the different opportunities to receive investment. What's on tap for this year? What can the viewers, if they come to the early stage symposium, what can they expect to see?
Well, one of the things we're really excited about is the president of the National Venture Capital Association, Bobby Franklin, is going to come in to speak. That's significant because that means that the NVCA has taken notice of Wisconsin, and they always have, but I think this is elevated, and we're able to talk about trends. And I think we're really looking forward to the company applications that can take part in either 5-minute pitches, 90-second elevator pitches, or investor intros, which is a chance to meet with a lot of investors individually. So those are some of the things that we, see as a highlight. But there'll be more announcements coming ahead. But yeah, that's November 9th and 10th in Madison at Monona Terrace. So
looking forward to it. That's exciting. Having the NVCA pay attention to Wisconsin's an important thing. You might think that we're wrapping up, Tom, but much like you used to do to me when I worked for you, you bring in something on the moment and say, surprise, I've got work for you. So I have surprise, I've got some stuff for you. You're a former reporter, editor. My mom is a former newspaper editor. I joke that, my mom used to return my birthday cards with red ink on them. It's kind of a joke. It's like, it wasn't red, but there were corrections whenever I wrote. You certainly had no reservation about correcting my writing. In fact, you beat AP style into me.
Yes.
I won't, you're probably still within the statute's limitation, so I won't say whether you literally beat it into me, but so much so that it's part of my writing, but I also now require it here at the chamber. So your legacy lives on through and how we write as well. You are no doubt an AP loyalist. So I thought it'd be fun to test your knowledge a little bit with some AP trivia. So are you game for a lightning round of some test your skills?
Sure. I deserve this payback, by the way. So that's
all right. So if we write, Tom Still has led the Wisconsin Technology Council for over 20 years. Is 20 spelled out or is it written as a numeral?
20 is written as a numeral, but over would be wrong.
Right.
It would be more than 20.
So correct on both as from my interpretation. However, our crack team here told me that in 2014, that now the AP style guide says that you can use over, which I say is a horrible change. I don't know how you feel about that, but seems unacceptable. Do you agree with their change of saying you can use over when you're talking about a number?
I do, because over it's more, I see it as better used with landscape and some other things like that. So I hate to be one of those old guy purists, but I guess I am.
Well, you're also, it was the first correction you ever made was I wrote over versus more than. All right, startup with a hyphen, one word or two?
One word is the AP style.
Hyphen?
No.
Correct. When saying our annual dinner was a sellout, is sellout one word or two?
That one I would one word, but I would hyphenate it.
Okay. Consider this sentence. The entire state owes the Wisconsin Technology Council President Tom Still a debt of gratitude. Is president capitalized?
It's capitalized, but I'm not sure about the statement.
Is Wisconsin spelled out or abbreviated? It
is spelled out.
After throwing his 451 451st touchdown, Aaron Rodgers celebrated by pretending to drink ayahuasca. 2 questions. Is ayahuasca a drug, and have you taken it? No, I'm just kidding. Is 451st spelled out or written as a number?
That would be written as a number, 451 ST.
All right. Oxford comma, appropriate or revolting?
It's I don't know. I guess I have to go somewhere in between. I don't like it, and it's what AP Style doesn't like it either. Revolting, I guess there are fans on either side.
All right. Well, we'll say you scored 100% with one toss-up that I might disagree with you. I think it's revolting. But with that, Tom, thanks for being with us today. It's always great to see you. Congratulations on 20 years of fantastic leadership at the council, but also on behalf of the state. Proud to call you a friend, a mentor. Just appreciate everything about you. Thanks to all of you for attending and spending some time with us, and hope you stuck with us through the lighthearted moment there at the end. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie, as well as Baker Tilly and Easy Office Products for supporting this program. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Zach.